Hey everybody, this is Erika Heald, and you've joined us for Content Chat live on LinkedIn and asynchronously on Twitter. Apparently, maybe. Use hashtag Content Chat and find out. We'll see. Sometimes it's happening over there, other times it's crickets. You can never know what you're going to get. All right, but where you do know what you're going to get is when you partner with other people to create content. You almost always get better reach, you get better insights, and you get content that you're usually a lot more excited about sharing and that you get more people to engage with. But how do you even find the right people to collaborate with? I got to tell you, almost every time I end up broaching the topic with a new client about let's work with some influencers in this area to create a new whatever it is, they look at me like I've just said they should, hire a Kardashian. And that is not influencer marketing. That is promotional sponsorship, which is a completely different ball of wax and not at all what I do as a content marketing consultant. So with that in mind, for today's content chat, we are bringing in an expert. We're bringing in Jason Falls to share everything he knows about influencer marketing. And a big thank you to Shane Shaps for suggesting Jason and Brandy McCallum, my bestie, for being a huge cheerleader too. So Jason, welcome to Content Chat. And let's hear a little bit from you about who you are, what you do, and why you think influencer marketing is something we should be paying attention to.
Sure thing. Thanks, Erica. It's great to be here. I've watched and followed along several times over the past, so it's good to be on the show. So my background, a lot like Erica's, is in the PR world. I was a public relations guy for a long time in college athletics. We called them being sports information directors back in the day. And then when my son was born, I jumped out into mainstream marketing, advertising, PR, and started working with bloggers and whatnot. This was mid 2000s when we called it blogger relations back then. So over the course of the last 15 years or so, I've kind of shifted from public relations and traditional media relations to helping brands with social media primarily, but that has involved a lot of what we now call influence marketing or influencer marketing. I have a tendency to take the R off the word, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But I think it's really important for brands to focus on influence marketing because that is the pathway to the trusted third-party recommendation, right? So when you are a brand, you can take out all the ads you want, you can put out all your own content you want, and a certain amount of that will be successful. But it's when the media, or it's when an influential person on some social network or a friend or family of the target consumer you're trying to reach actually talks about you to them in a very genuine, authentic way, that's when you have a much higher chance of converting a new customer. So that pathway through an independent third party who turns around and tells someone else, hey, you should buy this product, you should trust this brand, you should think this way about this issue, is a more effective way of getting your point across as a brand and converting customers. And so that's primarily what public relations people do, with a slightly different set of terminology. And it's, what influencer marketing people do these days in the social media world.
That's such a better way of describing it, because it's so hard when you're trying to get across to somebody, why this is a good strategic effort to be, building into your content strategy. They're like, well, we don't pay for, product placement or these different things. And you're like, that's not what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to cultivate that relationship with somebody who has that reach, who is already talking to and trusted by the people that you want to know who you are and consider you. So I think that is such a great way of framing it up. So with that said, and with the way that you're describing it, talk to me about taking that R off, because I do love that. And I think that really plays into how it fits into content strategy.
Sure. So a few years back, I was, I'm a practitioner, so I'm doing this influencer marketing thing all the time. And I started running into a little bit of a problem, a perception problem with businesses and brands that I was talking to about influencer marketing. And they kept saying to me, yeah, well, influencers aren't worth the investment. They're superficial. They're fake. They buy all their followers. It's not a good thing for us to invest in. And I started asking a lot of questions around that. And ultimately, what had evolved in the social media and traditional media space was every time you heard a story about an influencer, it was a negative story. It was that someone bought followers, or they photoshopped clouds in their Instagram pictures, or whatever. And so I have been working with online influencers, bloggers, Instagrammers, YouTubers, etc., people on Twitter, etc., for many, many years. And I happen to know that there is a superficial, sort of line of influential people out there, or social media stars out there, that aren't real cost effective for you, because they may astroturf, they may buy their followers, they may buy engagement, they may inaccurately or even mislead people in representing how big and how influential they are. And they're what I call the peace sign duck lips crowd. The people who do this all the time. So that superficial layer of lack of substance, lack of true influence does exist, but it's like 5, 10, maybe 15% of everything that's out there. All of the other people in the influencer content creator space are people who have outstanding content. They're very engaged with their audience, and their audience is very engaged with them. And when they recommend products and services, their audience turns around and goes and tries it. And so that's the meat of the influencer marketing world. So what I started to think about was, here's the problem. Everybody out there in the media, business owners, agencies, strategists, etc., we're talking about the influencers too much. What we need to really focus on is what we're trying to do, which is influence our audience to take action, right? And
Exactly.
so if you take that R off, and it's just a subtle change, it's a gimmick, yes. But if you say, look, I'm really focused on influence marketing and not influencer marketing, your mindset shifts. You're like, oh, wait a minute. It's all about persuading the audience to take action. And when you look at it through that filter, you're like, okay, someone who has 500,000 followers or subscribers on YouTube's is a potential viable path to that audience. But so is the president of the local PTA if you are the local franchisee of the parent-teacher store. Yep. So depending upon your situation, depending upon your goals, your brand, your geographic footprint, etc., your influence may be had through social media, but it might be had through traditional media. It might be had through political lobbyists. It might be had through community leaders. And if you look at it that way, now you're getting to the core of what we're trying to accomplish, either as influencer marketing people, or public relations people, media relations people, or marketing communication strategists. So that's the nuance. Take that R off, and it just makes you think a little differently about it.
100%. And I'm learning so much already that I'm going to steal from you, just as far as how to kind of help reframe the conversation. Because obviously, having been, you and I have both been in all sorts of collaborative content with all sorts of brands that wanted to reach the people in our own, personal networks or in our social audiences, et cetera. So we understand intrinsically, obviously, there are people out there that we as marketers respect, and who, if they have something to say, we're going to be listening. And if they're doing a survey or they're involved with a survey, we're going to promote it, because we know that these are trustworthy people. So I feel like for marketers, we're kind of spoiled, because marketers know how to market themselves. So it's pretty easy for us to understand who our marketing influencers are. But when you're in, some other kind of position doing content marketing, what are some ways that you can kind of figure out what kind of influencer will work the best for what you're trying to accomplish, and where you find them?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's everything from, and this is, what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And both in terms of effort and certainly resources. And so, yes, there are influencer marketing platforms out there that allow you to search and discover influencers and content creators by keywords or, topics. And you can go out and use those software platforms. Some of them are either free or have a freemium version. Some of them cost thousands of dollars a month, depending upon what you're doing. But you can also do it the old school way, which is go to your good friend Google and type in whatever category you're looking for, and type in who are the top influencers in basket weaving or whatever. And then you might want to break it down and say, well, who are the top Instagram accounts? Who are the top YouTubers, et cetera? So you can do those manual searches too. But ultimately, what you're trying to look for whether you're using a tool or not, is you're trying to get a read for their social media content and or their podcast and or their blog, because those are communications pathways too that the influencer marketing tools often overlook. But you're looking at that content to see, are they engaged with their audience? Is their audience engaged with them? Do they talk about products and services? And do they spark conversation around those products or services when they do, in the comment section, in the at replies, etc.? Do they look as if, go back and look at some of their content going back a few weeks, a few months, and say, do they look credible? Are they a credible person who can talk about this particular category, this particular product, service set, etc.? When you start to find the people who have a decent following, engage that following, are able to drive conversation, then you have a pretty good hunch that they're probably able to drive that sort of offline reaction as well, which is go to the store and buy this, or go try this, etc. A good content creator that you reach out to and say, hey, we'd be interested in collaborating with you, they're going to have the proof points for you and say, these are the previous brand partnerships we've done. These are the results that they've produced. And so we can verify that we are actually credible and able to move the needle for you. The ones who don't provide that or can't provide that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not good to potentially partner with. They may just not know any better, because there's a lot of content creators out there who are great at creating content and engaging their audience, but they don't really know anything about the business of marketing or advertising or being someone who does that. So it's really about kind of rolling up your sleeves and doing the research and figuring out, okay, who's creating good content, and are they creating something exponentially from that content in terms of reaction?
So when you are approaching, let's say, some of those micro influencers who maybe haven't done those brand partnerships before, are there any types of content collaborations or content projects that are better to kind of start them out with, or a better way to approach them, since you're going to be kind of selling them on the idea of, being an influencer, because they may not even think of themselves that way, and you're going to be kind of like baby stepping them into what it means to work with a brand?
Yeah, that's very true. And I think it is, the impetus is on us, as I'll call us influence marketing professionals for the sake of this conversation. The impetus is on us for those micro nano influencers or creators that we reach out to, who don't really have the savvy of doing this for a living. I think the impetus is on us to coach them, teach them, like show them how to do this. And I've literally, and my clients would probably, slap my hand for doing this, but I've had reached out to creators before and said, hey, I want to do this, and here's what this collaboration might look like. How much would you charge for that type of engagement, or would you charge for that type of engagement? And I've responded to people and said, you're not charging enough. Like, you've got a bigger audience and you've got a much better engagement footprint than you think you do, and you could charge a lot more for that. So I think the impetus is on us a little bit to coach those folks. But I think it's easy to start out. The easiest place to start out is, can we just get you to review the product? Can we send you the product for free? And maybe you require us to pay you. Maybe you don't offer, and maybe they don't ask, because some people will do it for in-kind product exchanges.
Yeah.
And you just say, hey, we want to send you the product, use it, and post content about what you think about it. So that's a great way to start. And then you can start to work with them and see, okay, do they follow the mediocre instructions we sent them, the not too complicated stuff?
Hey, I do really great creative briefs, Jason.
Yeah, exactly. So do they follow? Can they follow the directions? Are they a good partner with the brand? Do I like working with them? And then you can go on from there. But one thing that I think a lot of brands need to keep in mind, and this is something that I'm hearing from a lot of clients and customers of mine right now, is there has been a shift in the last probably 6 months, almost away from the concept of influencers and influence marketing, to really brands just going after micro and nano influencers and creators to just get the content. So it's more of a user generated content play than it is, I want you to post about my product on your channel. It's less about that and more about, I like the way you create content. I want to use it on my channels. And so I don't care if you post on yours. I just want to pay you or engage you to create that content, so that I've got, content from our organic social. I've got content for my paid meta, ad campaigns, things like that. That's been a shift in the last 6 months or so. So as you go into engaging with these micro and nano influencers, maybe you mitigate your risk a little bit and say, we don't want you to post on your channel. We want you to create the content so that we can use it. And then you can decide whether or not it sees the light of day.
I really like that idea too, because something you see frequently with enterprise blogs on the B2B side in particular is, you need to have all these blog posts come from a human being. Brands frequently want to just have it come from the brand. And it's like, no, because you need to have examples, you need to have anecdotes, it needs to be real. So it needs to come from a human being. And frequently they don't want it to come from whatever employee is in charge of the blog, because maybe that person has 2 years of job experience or no industry experience, right? So working with influencers to actually create that bylined content and who have that knowledge of the audience is just it's such a really smart way to kind of start out and to start building those relationships. I really like that.
Yeah, and God love guest blogging. Like, I mean, it's something that you don't see a lot. You see it more in obviously in the B2B space, because it's a longer buying cycle. There's a lot more, content consumption before someone makes a buying decision in the B2B space typically. But man, there's a lot of power still in that good, guest blog post, guest article, written word. And if you can find somebody out there in your customer base, or in your brand community that can provide that type of content for you, man, latch onto them and don't hesitate to pay them if they need it, because you're not going to find a lot of them. So grab the ones you can and keep them in close to the fold.
Exactly. I had an amazing financial services writer, and you can bet that I recommended him all over the place. And I've, used him with multiple clients, because when you find that person who is a brilliant practitioner, who also is a witty writer, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Yeah. So now, shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about, though, when you find those influencers who, have been doing this for a while, who regularly partner with brands, what are the things that people, should really be looking to engage them with doing right now? Like, is longer form, content what we should be doing more of, visual content, or does it really just depend on the influencer and their audience?
It depends on the influencer, it depends on their audience, and it depends on what they're good at creating. Because there are a ton of influencers out there, even in the B2B space, who are really good at creating that short form Instagram reel, TikTok type video, but can't write to save their lives. Right. And there's the opposite of that. There are people who are great at writing, white papers, reports, articles, blog posts, who they fall apart when the camera's turned on. So it's really about finding the right combination of content creator, type of content, and are they going to be a good partner for your brand in translating your brand through whatever they create? And so I think if I had to prioritize things in general, of course, this is going to differ in B2B and B2C, but in the B2C space, it's on everything kind of right now starts and ends with that short form video content, that snackable, 10-second to 60-second ish Instagram reel, TikTok, YouTube short. That's where consumers are turning their attention when they're online and, doom scrolling whatever platform they're on. So having someone who knows how to create that really, really well is powerful. I would say that also applies in the B2B space, but in the B2B space, you also have that segment of content need and consumer behavior where, if I'm going to spend a lot of money as a purchase officer for a construction company, I'm going to do a lot of research, which means I'm going to watch a lot of long form videos on YouTube. I'm going to read a lot of blog posts. I'm going to download some reports and some white papers. I'm going to go scan review sites like G2 and all those B2B software or B2B services review sites. So again, it's identifying the people who can create that type of content really well and have that deep experience on knowing how to create it so that it drives people to ultimately buy from you.
So then once you kind of have your plan in place, as far as, you figured out where in your content strategy you can plug in, where your big needs are, what's the best way to actually go about reaching out to these folks? And is it really different for B2B to B2C? Because I'll tell you, I have a an axe to grind here, which is every single day when I log on and I look at my LinkedIn account, there's somebody who wants to connect with me in order to pitch me something. And it makes me crazy because I have it set up so anyone can send me an email. Mm-hmm. And literally, if somebody is not willing to spend the $1 or whatever it is, it's probably less than that, to actually send me a note and not to send me a request to spam my network, it just makes me so crazy.
Yeah.
That's an instant no.
Yeah, the LinkedIn, that's one area where I think the LinkedIn people could strategize a little bit on how to make that inbox there a little bit more friendly for folks, because it definitely has become kind of overridden with those sort of spam type connection requests and whatnot over the last few years. I mean, it was never great, but it seems to have gotten worse. Although I certainly would not say anything, derogatory about the LinkedIn experience otherwise, because it's a very powerful network, especially if you're in the B2C space. But yeah, that in-mail
want to spam us
thing.
and get into our network so that way they can reach all of these buyers.
Yeah, that's very true.
I get it, but no.
Yeah. So I think the way to approach a creator, again, almost everything has to be answered with "it depends," but I'll walk you through a couple of the depends situations. If you are in the B2C space and you're looking at a content creator on TikTok or on Instagram or YouTube or even Facebook or Twitter, or whatever, Snapchat, Twitch, all of the different ones, if they don't have some public contact form or email address, or DM me if you're interested in a partnership or whatever, you have to do a little bit of digging or research, or you can send them a direct message on whatever the platform is. And I would just recommend be very short and to the point. Typically content creators get inundated just as much as you and I do with spam emails and spam outreach, so you've got to keep it short, you've got to make it pretty compelling, and then just let them decide whether or not they want to respond. And the example that I've used before, and I literally used this, it was an email outreach years ago for a consumer electronics company, and they were actually unveiling a new $3,000 audio system that was weatherproof, so you could put it on your back patio, right? Which I can't afford that, but by golly, it sounds nice. So anyway, my outreach to these content creators, whether it was email or whether it was a DM on one of the platforms, was, "Hi, I can put a $3,000 audio system in your backyard. Are you interested? Let me know." The response rate on that was pretty good compared to other campaigns I'd done before.
I bet. I mean, how juicy. What a great offer.
Right. So you've got to make that offer compelling. And if you're not giving away a $3,000 audio system for the backyard, and you're giving away something that's, kind of a commodity or something they can pick up at Walmart or whatever, then you have to be a little bit more creative on how you approach them. And you say, "Hey, I'd love to partner with you to create some content. Here's what we have in mind. Let me know if you're interested." I typically will tell people your response rate is going to vary, certainly, but I typically tell folks and recommend I wouldn't reach out to that person more than 2, maybe 3 times, because at that point you're just a spammer and you're interrupting their feed and you're bothering them, so they're not going to say yes to it. Persistence is great, but in the world that we live in, persistence is just spam. And so you kind of have to be realistic about it. The good news is typically, even in the B2B space, there are dozens, if not hundreds of options. So unless you are really fixated on this one creator, which I don't recommend, but unless you're really fixated on one creator, there are plenty of other people you can reach out to, and you can put together a pretty compelling program.
So when you're going through this process, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you had someone that you'd identified that was going to be amazing for your project, but then some red flags started popping up and it turned out that they were a nightmare? And if so, what were those red flags? What should we be looking out for? Because I mean, we've all been in those situations where we've just been sure something was going to be great and then it was terrible. So walk me through how to avoid that trap.
Yeah. So there's the obvious red flags that you want to look for. So search through their content. Do they swear? Do they get involved in politics? Do they talk about firearms or drugs or religion or whatever that you are sensitive to? So look for that. And, a lot of the softwares out there, I mean, my day job is at Scipio, and we have a 14-point brand check thing that our software puts a creator through. So it makes it really easy for you to see. But you want to do that digging and see, not just on the surface, go through a month or two worth of posts and read and look at the images and make sure that they're aligned with who your brand is. That's the obvious one. But as you get into the communication and collaboration, you're going to want to look for other red flags. The biggest red flag that I typically is the first one that I see, and the one that probably informs my decisions on whether or not I want to work with that creator, is if I reach out and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about a collaboration. If the first thing they respond with is, what's your budget? Then I know they're not interested in anything but money. Yep. And if they're interested in only money, they're not going to care whether or not the communication is successful.
Right.
I'm actually going through this right now with, or went through this last week with someone. We reached out to them on behalf of a client and said, hey, we'd like to talk to you as a talent manager, actually, which I was kind of shocked that I got this response. But I reached out to them and said, hey, we'd like to collaborate with, one of your creators. And we'd love to get on a call and talk about how the creative execution could happen, if that's even of interest or possible, because we don't just want a sponsored post. We want to do something really cool.
Yeah.
And their response was, well, we'll take a call once you give me a scope of work and a budget. And I'm like,
okay,
but I don't know the scope of work because I want to have a conversation first.
That's co-creation and collaboration.
And they were very insistent. Well, I'm not going to get on a call until you give me a scope and a budget. And I said, well, we're not going to use your creator. So bye. So looking, there are creators and influencers out there, and I'm not taking anything away from the creators who know their worth and their value and fight for their worth and their value and charge what they charge because they know that they're worth that. Absolutely, please do that. But if a content creator comes back to you consistently and all they're concerned about is money or upcharging you for this or charging you extra for that, or you need to pay my expenses for this, that, or the other, then you're dealing with somebody who's just going to consistently be a headache. There's a lot of fish in this sea. Walk past them.
Yeah. Because the thing is that if it is something that's going to be mutually beneficial, and you are really meeting a need in that creator's, in their community, they'll be willing to at least have a conversation. You still might not be able to agree on terms, but at least you can have that conversation and you can pitch the idea of the collaboration and then see what comes of it. But if they, I think that's definitely short-sighted, because if it's
and I'll tell you this, I would say, I'm ballparking this, but I would say 70 to 75% of the conversations, about collaborations that I have with creators never come to fruition. It might be that we can't come to terms. It might be that they're not interested in my creative idea, or they just want to do it the way they've always done it, and it doesn't really work for my client or my brand. Yeah. It might be that we have this conversation and the original idea gets scrapped because they've got a better one. So having the conversation is a really critical piece of doing influence marketing really, really well, because we need to continue to distance ourselves from the 2007, 2008 era sponsored post, era of influence marketing, because it's no longer about, hi, I'm a creator, I like this brand, to go buy it. That doesn't work anymore, right? It has to be much more involved, much more creative, much more strategic, and much more authentic for it to actually work. So you've got to start having those conversations about what's possible.
100%. And those folks who are really looking to meet their sponsorship goal for the quarter, they're going to be taking on a lot of sponsors, and they're probably going to be taking on your competitors. And you got to think about how you feel about that, because if they are looking for that, if they're looking at the money as the first and foremost, they're also going to be looking for you to pay them a lot extra in order to then not be talking to your competitors, or they're going to use the fact that they just got sponsored by you to pitch your competitors. So that's why it's so important to make sure you find those folks who actually have an affinity for your brand.
Yep, for sure.
And these days it feels like that's a little bit harder, because a lot of our tools that we used to use for, going out there and finding the right influencers and seeing who's having conversations, so many of them were Twitter heavy, because that's where so much conversation was happening. But with the hefty fees, literally zero of the tools that I pay for are interested in continuing to use Twitter because they're like, it's not worth what they're charging.
Yeah.
So that's been fascinating.
Yeah.
Have you, I mean, how are you adapting to that, to the lack of the trend data?
Well, it's I'm glad you asked me that, because Twitter is kind of in this weird state of flux right now, especially with the advent of Threads, which isn't a solution yet, or isn't a replacement yet, but could be certainly in the near future. But the engagement rates on Twitter for most brands are down. The click-through rates to websites for most brands on Twitter are down. There's a lot of trust issues from consumers with Twitter, and they're looking for alternatives. Certainly, another thing that hurts Twitter is, people of I'll say the younger generation. So I'm 50, which means anybody younger than me can get off my lawn. But the younger folks out there, the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas and whatnot, they don't tend to communicate with text anymore, at least not in a social networking context. They do videos, right?
Yeah.
And Twitter hasn't really made a shift toward that short form video. You can post videos there, and videos work there, but they've not taken it to the stories, reels type approach that the other social networks have. So there's a lot of problems with Twitter. But I think the way that I would sort of introduce a topic here of how do you identify the right people to reach out to and whatnot, and how do you find effective creators to represent your brand. One thing that we've skipped for a long time, and this is from the brand side of things and the software side of things, but one thing we've skipped for a long time in terms of outreach and influence marketing is actually mapping your brand community and looking at the people you already know. Let's look at the people who already buy from you, your customer base. Yeah. Let's look at your social media followers, who follows your brand online, who talks about you online. Let's look at the people who already are creating content, or at least are familiar with your brand, and find and map the influential voices there. That's the core premise that Scipio was built upon, which is kind of my day job. And that's one of the reasons why I joined the company, because they're filling a need for mapping that brand community that exists out there, because none of the other software companies are doing it. And so being able to look at your customer data and or your social media data and say, oh my goodness, look at this. We've got 15 people who have 25,000 or more followers on Instagram who already buy products from us, and we're not talking to them, right? So it's just kind of this logical step that we skipped for a long time, and the software companies skipped for a long time because they were focused on influencers, not on influence. And so when you look at who's going to influence people to buy or try our product, the best people to do that are the people who are already buying and trying it, the customer base. So mapping your community to find those points of creators and creativity that can then take your brand forward, I think is a smart first step that we've been skipping for a long time. The second thing is, let's go out and, instead of looking for content creators based on their follower count, let's go out and look at content creators based on the type of content they create. Let's do some visual searches. Let's do some video searches, and let's identify content that aligns with our brand, that represents what we're trying to, display and show and communicate to our audiences, and find the people who create that type of content and partner with them too. And so those are the core sort of fundamental DNA principles that are baked into Scipio and what we do, because we see that problem's not being solved out there in the marketplace in terms of software.
Well, I got to tell you, you've definitely piqued my interest here, and we hadn't talked in advance about talking about your day job, but in light of the fact that so many of us have these huge communities on Twitter, all of these, I have 13,000 content marketers who follow me on Twitter. I'm not there anymore because I can't show up in front of my people. I'm not publishing inflammatory content that reaches the algorithm. Even people like Ann Handley, who is amazing. Some of her great posts are, having a reach of 400. It is ridiculous there. So I feel like we're stuck now because we've built these communities. We have all these people that we know care about us and, that we want to cultivate. But now we're having that, hey, we built on this rented land that might turn out to be a swamp. what do we do? Like, can we use a tool like this in the mapping to then be able to activate that audience before the ship sinks over there? Because I got to tell you, that's definitely of concern.
Well, I think in terms of engaging the full, spectrum of your audience on Twitter, I think that we may be a little past that point
Yeah.
because so many people are just not paying attention to it as much anymore. But that actually sort of belies the idea and the recommendation that even though sometimes it's frustrating to do this, you kind of have to make sure that your brand reaches into different social networks with different content for different reasons. So that Twitter community over the course of the past 4 or 5 years, we all should have been sort of migrating some of them over to Instagram.
Yeah.
Or maybe TikTok, or maybe even YouTube Shorts, that kind of thing, right? As the consumer behavior has shifted, and this goes back to 2008 when Facebook opened up to anything other than a .edu email address. That was the first time Twitter was really threatened with another social network taking attention away from what it was doing. And over the course of time, regardless of who was in charge at Twitter, they didn't do enough over the years to stay first or second, right?
Yeah.
They were first for a while in terms of social networking attention, and then they were second, and then they were a distant second, and then Instagram came out and they were third, and then, they just kept moving down the line.
Yeah.
There's lots of reasons for that. Twitter is a different animal and a different mechanism, and has a slightly different audience than those more visually driven platforms. But as I indicated earlier, the younger generations have come up. They are the adults with the buying power now, for the most part, and they don't tweet. They Instagram, they video post, they Snapchat. And
the
so
ones that like to write are on Reddit.
Exactly. Absolutely. There's so many different options out there, and Twitter didn't keep up. And if we didn't diversify over the course of the last few years, bringing our audience over to other platforms, it's probably too late to find most of them on Twitter these days.
Yeah. So sad.
It is.
I mean,
who knows?
I'm super biased because this whole
maybe Threads will rescue us. Who knows? It's not there yet, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, at least as compared to some of the other upstart Twitter competitors, it made it less lonely to log in, that you could actually find people that you knew, which, every one of those other ones, you get invited by somebody you can't even find that person who invited you on the platforms. And you're like, okay.
You must be talking about Mastodon, because that was in my exact experience with Mastodon. Was I logged in and it's like, oh, you're on this server and I'm on that server. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Exactly.
So and
and frankly, Blue Sky, same kind of thing. And it was interesting to me because a lot of them felt sort of like we were in the movie Heathers, and I was the junior high school friend, and I wasn't one of the Heathers, and so I was going to be, ignored in the hallway. You say hello to somebody, or you chime into a conversation, and you get dead silence.
And unfortunately, we can't pause so that the third of your audience can go find out what Heathers is. But
it's a really fantastic Gen X movie, so I've just shared what my age is too. But yeah, highly recommended. If you have nothing else to do this summer, go find Heathers.
It's a good weekend watch.
It's like Mean Girls. It's like, in Mean Girls, you can't sit at the table with them. That's how it feels on some of these networks, which is funny because they're supposed to be social networks. But I digress. Back to what we're talking about, though. All right. So we figured out the right people to connect with. We've actually gotten them to say yes. Like, how do we actually make sure then that we keep on track with the influencers that we're working with on these collaborations, and that we're actually measuring something that matters from a success standpoint, as opposed to just looking at the favorite in the PR world back in the day, impressions, which, unless you're just looking for brand awareness, and then you're actually going to pay the money to measure the brand awareness after, which almost no one does.
Yep.
Impressions is a vanity metric.
That's true. It is. So I've always been an advocate for the phrase "plan to measure." And so that starts from your goal and your strategy that you come up with at the very beginning of everything before you ever reach out to an influencer. You're like, okay, what are we trying to accomplish here? Are we trying to send people to a website to purchase something? Okay, then trackable links and URLs and pixels are going to be needed because we're going to need to track that stuff. Are we trying to get people to think differently about a topic or our product or service? Well, then we're going to need to do some measure of survey on the front end to give us a benchmark of where we started so that we can do the same thing on the back end to figure out where we ended so we know how far the needle moved, if at all. So if you don't plan to measure up front, it's like getting to the end of the driveway with your family in the minivan and saying, okay, where are we going on vacation? You haven't bought tickets and you haven't packed a suitcase and you don't know who's going to feed the cats or the dogs. And right. You don't plan a vacation that way. And so you shouldn't plan your strategies or your executions in digital marketing, social media, influence marketing that way either. You've got to start out with saying, what data traps can we set along the way for this campaign so that we are monitoring and measuring and monitoring what we're doing along the way so that A, we can change direction if we need to, if it's not working, but B, understand and quantify what we're getting out of it. And normally that's going to need to have some correlation or callback to revenue or sales or something like that. Doesn't have to be directly tied to it. But if it's not directly tied to it, I will guarantee you will have to explain that to a C-level person along the way and make sure they understand the goal was not to sell things with this particular campaign. The goal was to change thinking. The goal was to create awareness, etc. Yeah. And so as long as everybody within the organization or your clients, if you're in an agency or a partner, as long as everybody understands what the goal is up front and you have planned to measure the KPIs and data points along the way to understand how far you've gotten in that pursuit, then you're going to be fine. The problem that most brands and agencies have is they say, okay, our goal is this and let's go do it. And the goal doesn't matter what the goal is. At the end of the day, someone is going to say, how much money did we make? And if you haven't planned to measure that along the way, you're up the creek. You're gonna be basically doing what most advertising agencies and PR firms have been doing for probably centuries, if not decades, and that's fumbling around at the last minute to try to figure out, what's our AVE, and do we have any impression numbers, or what did we do, right?
That's so important too, because you have to have those goals and how you're going to measure them in place before you even start creating or co-creating the activation with the influencer. Yep. Because the entirety of your content, your approach, your what action you're asking people to take is completely different depending upon what your goal is. So that's why it's always fascinating. I don't know if you've ever judged any marketing awards competitions, but frequently if I end up being asked to judge strategies, and I'll read through and I'll be like, well, there's some problems here. Like, there was no objective up front, and these are results that you're reporting on because they're things that you could see happened, but I'm not seeing anyway that what you said you were going to do drove any of those results.
Yep. And when I have been a judge for competitions before, if they don't state a clear objective or goal up front, I judge it based on how much revenue that they drove, because that's the business bottom line that it's going to be judged by. And so if their goal was to just create awareness about a new product and I don't see sales numbers, then they don't really get very many good points from me, because I don't know what their goal was if they don't state that clearly. Exactly. And if you don't state it clearly and say, and we're going to measure this by this, then this, and here's those results, then you might as well just, you're throwing your money away if you're putting yourself up for awards in that case.
100%. But of course, we know that even when you have planned everything and you have all of this stuff in place, you've got that award-winning plan in place, so that way when it does knock it out of the park, you can apply for that award, is so that we can have it sitting on your bookcase. Sometimes these things just don't happen. Sometimes the deadline comes and goes and you can't get a hold of that creator. And, you wonder if they've died even, because they've gone so dark everywhere because they're avoiding you and probably other people. But what are some of the big pitfalls that you've seen happen? And are there any ways that we can kind of sidestep them or mitigate them if we get stuck?
Sure. The first key is the, when you're doing the outreach and you're having that initial communication, you're going to get a feel for, are they professional? Are they, punctual? Are they responsive, et cetera? So the ones who aren't problematic, you're going to have to monitor them a little bit closer if you want to use them. But of course, there's two, documents, pieces of paper, communications that are critically important to every creator campaign, whether you're working with a Kardashian or whether you're working with someone that you found who creates really good images on Instagram and they have 200 followers, but you love their content. And that is, number one, an agreement. So let's come up with a piece of paper, even if it's just one piece of paper that says, we're going to pay you this much money or this much product or whatever we're going to give you in exchange for this. And let's sign the bottom line, because that, even if it's just a piece of paper with a couple of signatures on it, it makes it more official. It's, somewhat legally binding. Doesn't always work out that way, but somewhat legally binding. And it plants that seed of expectation of formality in the creator's mind that, oh, I've signed a piece of paper saying, I'm going to do this, so I should probably do it.
Accountability.
Right. Accountability. That's the great word there that I was looking for. So that's the first piece. The second piece, and this is, again, it's a little bit of something that a lot of people skip because they think they don't need it, but you do need it. And that's the creative brief, right? And whether or not you are reaching out to a content creator who does their own creative and they don't really collaborate. I'm going to create content my way, and you can tell me what the brand and product is, but stay out of my business. Even in those situations, or in the micro nano influencer where they don't even know what a creative brief is, and they're just like, I'll take a picture of some of your stuff. Sure. Coming up with that creative brief to say, hey, we signed this agreement. We want you to create content. There's going to be a value exchange here. Here are our expectations. We want you to communicate these points. Now, the impetus is on the brand to understand the influencer content creator collaboration and know that you can't really, or you can, but you're not going to have a good time with this. You can't really dictate the content must say this and it must have that and it must do this and it must have that. What you have to say is, what we're going for is for you to communicate to your audience these things. We want to leave it up to your creativity to be able to figure out how to do that. So we'd like to collaborate with you to make sure that those check boxes are going to happen. But if you try to take away too much of the creative direction from the creator and they allow you to do that, the communication is going to fall flat because they're just doing a sponsored post at that point and reiterating your talking points. You've got to let them create something that's meaningful to their audience because they know their audience way better than you do. But having that creative brief to guide them and say, this is the expectation we have on our end. This is what we want you to communicate to your audience. Those two pieces of paper typically are going to take care of those problems.
And it's so important to have it also, to have some of those things that if they're included in the content, that's going to be a stopping point for you. I know that there was a food blogger who was working on a piece of sponsored content, and she was wearing a t-shirt that had a logo on it, and she was wearing brand name sneakers. Mm-hmm. And both of those things were a problem for the brand because their legal department didn't want them to get in trouble for having some other brand's logo, which it just sort of, I was like, what? But she had to reshoot it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I wouldn't have even thought of that, even though I've done all of this stuff for so long. I don't really have branded logoed stuff, so it would never have happened in my life. But I'm like, wow, and if you're going to have your legal department step in and just kill something, you've got to know what those triggers are, because you cannot expect that the creators are going to know.
Yeah, if you don't have really good lines of communication with your legal department, then what normally happens is they step in and make a mess out of things at the last minute. And typically it's kind of embarrassing for you. It's embarrassing for the creator. It's frustrating. And that's not a slight against the legal department. They have a very important role to play. Totally. But the important part is for you to have really good open communication and collaboration with them on the front end so that those requirements that you send out in your creative brief and whatnot have all of the different points that legal wants in there. I would
Yep.
rephrase them because lawyers happen to write it in a very imposing, threatening way. So I would rewrite all that to be a little bit softer. But at the
Friendly
same time,
disclaimers, friendly disclosure.
if all that's included in the creative brief, then you have something to point back to and say, oh, you know what? I'm really sorry, but you shot this whole thing with a Nike sweatshirt and we can't have the Nike logo. So could you either edit the video to blur it out, or can you reshoot it with not that sweatshirt? Because
Yep.
and that's in the documentation.
Exactly. Which is why, again, you want to always make sure you're doing these collaborations with a contract, even if
Yes.
it's super brief.
Yes.
Now, we only have 10 minutes left. So I want to kind of get into some of your favorite, creator collaborations that you've worked with people on. And maybe we can talk about, if we have time, talk about Barbie. Because if you want to talk about influence marketing right now,
Yeah.
Barbie is everywhere. But first, let's talk about something more personal. I want to hear it from you. Like, what is something that you've worked on that was been just really exceeded expectations, and it was super creative and collaborative, and what we should all be trying to do?
So one of the first, this is a little older, but it's really relevant because it was the first time that my concept of influence marketing really came to life in an interesting case study. So I was working for an agency in Lexington, Kentucky, called Cornet. I worked there for about 5 years, and the University of Kentucky Healthcare, so the hospital and healthcare system in Central Kentucky, was a client and had been for a long time. And we've done some great collaborative work with them over the years. And Cornet, when I say we, Cornet had developed a new advertising campaign and a kind of a hero commercial spot, 2-minute movie to kick off the commercial campaign and whatnot. And the challenge from an influence perspective was we're going to launch this video on Facebook. This was a couple years ago, so probably would have done it somewhere else today. But we're going to launch this on Facebook, and we want to get as many people to not only watch the video to kind of sort of understand the campaign theme and all that kind of stuff, but we want them to use that opportunity. We want to use that opportunity to ask them to share their story, their personal story with UK healthcare, because University of Kentucky is a huge, university. It's the kind of land grant state institution. It has a big footprint. It's a big brand. Everybody in Central Kentucky at some point has come into contact with UK healthcare. And so we wanted to solicit those stories. And so what we did is this 2-minute movie, and it was well done. Hats off to the creative team at Cornet. They did a fantastic job of turning this sort of marketing message into a cinematic presentation, which was pretty awesome. We launched this on Facebook. And so we did two things. First of all, we did influencer marketing. We found the people on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and whatnot in the Central Kentucky market that had a lot of followers. And we said, hey, we want to engage you to come to this video when we launch it on this day. And we want you to do 3 things. We want you to like the video. We want you to comment on it and tell your UK healthcare story. And we want you to share it with your Facebook and or Instagram and or YouTube audience, depending on where you want to share the link. So we engaged influencers to do that, the traditional influencer marketing. But then we said, wait a minute, we can't stop there. We've got to find people with influence. So we got the mayor involved. We got the CEO of the Urban League involved. We got local state representatives involved. We got a local pediatric dentist involved. We also, the UK healthcare team, actually the day before this thing launched, they pulled their several thousand employees together and showed them the video ahead of time and asked them to go participate on the launch date, right? So we were literally driving thousands of people to this piece of content and asking them to engage with the content, which would boost it up in the Facebook algorithm, right? And tell their UK healthcare story. So the end results were, and I'm doing this from memory, but I believe in the first 24 hours, there were something like 40,000 comments or views on the video, and thousands of comments. Within the first 30 days, there were 800,000 views on this video. Wow. Lexington, Kentucky only has a population of about 320,000 people. So we were about 3x the population on video views. And it also actually launched a different something that we didn't design the campaign to do this, but because we were able to collect so many great stories about UK healthcare, it actually launched an entire new content marketing suite called We Are Proof, which is now on the UK healthcare website, where you can go and read all these great stories that people have provided. And it's been ongoing content on their website now for going on 3 or 4 years, I believe. So that was the influencer piece and the influence piece all coming together in one sort of cohesive, campaign that was super successful.
And Jason, it was also kind of magical because that's a highly regulated industry. And as you know, in those kinds of industries, you can't ask people to do reviews and all of these other kinds of, all these constraints, but you 100% can share stuff and people can react to it and comment and proactively give their experiences and their reviews.
Yeah. And when's the last time you saw somebody commenting on a social network about a hospital or a healthcare system that was positive?
Like never.
Yeah. Basically. So there you
go. Well, we only have a few minutes left, so I did want to talk to you about Barbie. Yes, I was a Barbie girl growing up. I made clothes for my Barbies. I built her apartment buildings out of Avon boxes. I was that kid. I like to make things. But everybody is seeing Barbie everywhere right now. Barbie Pink there's so many product activations. I have never seen a kind of brand influence campaign like this that has really spanned brand co-collaborations, influencer marketing, events, and all this kind of fan engagement in UGC. It is amazing how much stuff's going on. Do you feel like this is kind of going to inspire more brands to go out there and try different things? Or do you think this is just sort of an anomaly, since Mattel and Barbie are such this, nostalgic, iconic brand?
Well, it's definitely, it's a case study that's being written as we're watching it, and it will wind up being used over and over again. So it'll certainly inspire broader thinking and more, sort of multiple touch point thinking in the future, because it's not just influencers. There's, a huge media buy ad campaign behind it. I happen to be in a situation that I know this, so this is not a promotional thing, but they're also Barbie has profiles on several dating apps. And so they're using paid promotions on dating apps to be able to kind of tie in the story to that. So the marketing team behind this movie, and I don't know exactly who it is, but whether it's the motion picture studio or their agencies, absolutely brilliant. They're inundating the market to make sure that the awareness about this movie is at a crescendo as it launches in the first few weeks, which is the thing that makes, movies sell. And, it's a iconic brand that's sort of sparking a lot of nostalgia with people. And so there's just a lot of positive things that are all lined up in a row for this thing to be huge. And so, it's going to be a mega case study for quite a few years to come. This is going to probably rival or even, outdo the Oreo Super Bowl tweet. My apologies to Leo Morricone, who was behind that, but it's going to be a big social media / influencer case study and advertising case study for years to come. So pay attention.
And I bet you Ginny Dietrich will write up how it's a great peso case study example too. And if she hasn't already, I will bug her and tell her she should. Because
that's true.
It's pretty amazing. Well, since we're just about out of time, I did want to give you the opportunity to give a plug for where folks can find out more about you and influencer marketing and all the cool stuff that you're working on, including your podcast network.
Sure. So on the side, away from all of the stuff that I do in my day job and whatnot, I run the Marketing Podcast Network, which is 54, I believe, shows that are all together in one network. So marketingpodcasts.net is the site for that. I'm pretty easily found on all the social networks. Jason Falls, there's a guy in North Carolina with the same name who doesn't like me very much, but that's okay. I was there first. And then my podcast, Winfluence, can be found at winfluencepod.com. And so that's all the me part of it. And then my day job, as we sort of talked a couple of times during the show today, is at Scipio.ai. And We basically scale user-generated content collection and activation for you. So if your brand needs UGC to fill those ad creative coffers or social media content, drop me a line.
Excellent. I'm going to be checking it out because I'm giving a big AI related presentation in a couple of weeks. So
we got a lot of cool AI stuff in store. So
awesome.
The user-generated content piece of it is the first step in a roadmap that includes a lot of cool AI. So
that's awesome. I can't wait. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. And everybody who's watching this, we're going to have a recap on the blog as well. And we'll link out to every place that you can find Jason. So that way you can up your influence marketing game.
Thanks, Erika.
Have a great rest of your week. Take care.